Let's get the reaction now from the Shadow Employment and Workplace Relations Minister, Michaelia Cash. Thanks for joining us here today. The government, as Trudy mentioned there, indicated that they would shift ground on the rules around multi-employer bargaining so that the smaller businesses don't get roped in where their workforce might not be up for any change. Doesn't that show the government is listening?
Absolutely not. If the government were listening, they would have consulted with the job creators in this country before they introduced the legislation. They failed to do that. And if they were listening, they would actually pull the bill completely, because employers across Australia, even with the changes mooted by Tony Burke, have said these changes mean absolutely nothing. They do not address the fundamental concerns that the job creators across this country have with the bill, which is the imposition of one-size-fits-all agreements across multiple workplaces with the ability to take strike action across industries and potentially close down Australia. Kieran, you only have to look at what the National Farmers Federation have said today, and this should be a worry to all Australians that this bill could potentially impact supply chains. Now, what happens when you impact a supply chain? It means food doesn't get to supermarkets, and it also means you actually pay more for food. So Australians, I would be really, really worried when you've got the head of the National Farmers Federation saying enough is enough. This is actually going to fundamentally impact getting food to supermarkets and more Australians paying more for food. Labor should listen, pull the bill and let the Senate do what it does best, review it and then provide recommendations.
My understanding is the government will announce further amendments today in response to some of those concerns, including from the business groups and crossbenchers. Is that a good thing? Do you welcome that more amendments are coming?
It's even worse, actually, because what it says is this legislation is not fit for purpose. This legislation will actually not lift wages in this country. When you have a minister table in the parliament a bill that he admits on day one is a dog's breakfast, and then it actually gets so bad that the minister has to stand up now day after day saying, I'll amend the legislation, I'll amend the legislation. That's when you actually know you have a problem. Employers even today across Australia are saying the amendments that have been announced to date mean nothing. The only thing this bill still does is ensure more strikes and less jobs. The one thing this government should be doing is looking at how do you firm up the record high, or should I say record low unemployment rate in Australia. The last thing you do with rising inflation, rising interest rates, rising electricity prices is literally bring into the parliament a piece of legislation which on any analysis is going to potentially cripple our economy.
Will you vote against it or seek to amend the bill?
There is nothing in this bill that is going to assist in rising wages, in getting wages on the move. This bill, as you know, also abolishes the Australian Building and Construction Commission. It hands over the construction industry in this country to the most militant union in Australia, the construction division of the CFMMEU. The economic impact of that is estimated to be $47.5 billion between now and 2030.
So you will vote against it?
We will vote against this bill. This bill does nothing to increase wages in this country. When you have every employer in Australia coming out and saying, despite the amendments that Tony Burke is having to make, it does nothing. It does nothing to change what is fundamentally wrong with this bill, in particular for smaller businesses. Smaller businesses could have imposed on them a one-size-fits-all agreement that basically means they are now competing with larger businesses in Australia.
But it's got to be a majority in the workforce per organisation now.
It's still compulsory and it's still multi-employer bargaining. At the moment, you can actually negotiate at an enterprise level, and that's what we fundamentally believe. The fact that the Labor Party are moving towards a one-size-fits-all agreement, regardless of the nature of your workforce, it only disadvantages the smaller players in Australia. But as I said, what's more concerning for me...
You did say in government as well that the bargaining system needed change.
This is not the
reform.
change the bargaining system needed. We brought forward very sensible changes to enterprise agreement making. You really need to streamline that process and get it moving again, because it has slowed in Australia. But the changes that Tony Burke and Anthony Albanese are putting forward, they are mooted to literally decimate enterprise agreements in Australia. Even the Productivity Commission
they're
has
saying
said...
the EBAs have the top sort of billing, so to speak, and that a multi-employer bargaining would only come to place where those EBAs weren't in place.
No. So basically what happens is your employees can still vote to be part of a negotiation process, even if the employer does not want that. So you could literally have a hairdresser in a shopping centre now negotiating with the hardware
But if
shop.
an EBA is already in place, could that override the
No,
multi-employer
the EBA
bargaining?
itself stays in place, but there are most smaller businesses and medium businesses, they don't have EBAs. Larger businesses in Australia, they are the users of EBAs. Why? Because it's such a complex process that they have the HR departments. The impact that this bill will have on smaller businesses throughout Australia is going to be absolutely devastating. All it will do is increase strike action and people lose jobs. That's not how you get wages moving in Australia.
Shadow Workplace Relations Minister Michaelia Cash, thanks
Great
as
to be
always.
with you.
We'll talk to you soon.